So, surprise, surprise, Ben. Not a surprise to us because we've seen this coming. Brand new New York Times poll now showing that support for Israel way down. I think for the first time, according to the New York Times and their polling, a majority of Americans now oppose sending additional economic and military aid to Israel. If you told me this 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said you're bullshitting me. Big development. And I also want to point out that 40% of Americans say that Israel is intentionally killing civilians. That is up from 22% from December of 2023. Just huge development here. And I was reading in this poll that a lot of young people from both the conservative and the more left side have kind of turned on Israel. But yeah, I mean, majority of Americans now saying, hey, we don't want to send our tax dollars to Israel to fund this war, to fund what they're doing there. They have universal health care. They have, their national debt is way lower than ours according to their GDP per capita. So huge development out there. I think we both saw this coming. What do you think of this new development, and how do you think kind of the Trump team has been reacting to it with this new Gaza peace plan that they're pushing out there?
Yeah, I kind of think the right wing response to it is pretty weird to watch. I guess in some ways it's similar to the dynamic between Biden and the left, but I was going to say that I feel like part of why this happened in the poll is there's no one really defending the Israel side right now. When Biden was in office, you kind of had the Republican Party in general kind of like arguing that if anything he was too anti-Israel, which is kind of absurd. But now that Trump's in office, you have all the Democrats who can universally, even if they're a little more pro-Israel, kind of see that what Trump's doing isn't working and that it's continued to go on and kind of be against it in an anti-Trump way. But then on the Trump side, like when I watch him talk about Israel, it's so bizarre because it's almost like he's completely disconnected from kind of the right-wing anti-Israel wing, almost similar to Biden. But I mean, it's not like these people are there protesting everything either. But I do think there's kind of a growing anti-Israel sentiment on the right. And I know with the Charlie Kirk stuff, people were talking about him kind of becoming a little more skeptical of it right before he was shot. So I don't know. It's weird to watch the dynamic. And I do think this goes back to a lot of what we talked about, which is Trump's kind of echo chamber that he's in with his people and with Truth Social, which is all bots. And yeah, so I don't think he's really
Yeah.
like aware of the kind of dynamics in the Republican Party, which are changing as this poll shows.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty fascinating to say, but even amongst like Democrats, it was I think another New York Times poll I saw, 8% of Democrats support the war, which is like an insanely low number. I think it's crazy. It was like a majority of Jewish Democrats, Black Democrats. It's just across the board. I think this is something that we've moved beyond just kind of Democrats being against what's happening and sending money to Israel. Well, now you have a majority of independents, even a sizable chunk of Republicans. So who knew this was going to be like the bipartisan issue? I think we kind of saw it coming because we have younger friends that are on both sides, and both of them, I would say, in my friend group, are pretty fed up with Israel and don't think we should send them a single dime of our dollars. So I think there's a huge shift,
Yeah.
and
Well,
we
and for
we see
better or
this.
worse, I think the part about TikTok in the tweet that we're looking at, which I know
Oh
we're
yeah,
going
if
to
you want
talk
to
about,
explain that real
I
quick.
well, just that TikTok in general, there's a consensus, and I think we have a clip from Mitt Romney discussing this, but there's a consensus that pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel sentiment is kind of growing on TikTok, other social media platforms, but TikTok in particular. And I just think it's interesting because I think regardless of like the Republican implication is kind of like, oh, this is this threat to our country that the Chinese TikTok is orchestrating or something like that. But I do think it is true that among our generation, you were saying like both sides, that on TikTok and on these platforms, like it has blown up a lot. I think that's how a lot of people have come to kind of turn their opinion on this
Yeah,
topic. And I do think like just the way the algorithm works, kind of hearing about these atrocities and the idea that it's something people don't want you to know about or talk about is something that lends itself to kind of the TikTok algorithm for better or
yes,
worse. So I definitely think it's true that that's part of the
yeah.
growth. Like I think Mitt Romney is correct in his premise here. I mean, I wouldn't say that then means we should try and like control it so that's not the case, but I do think he's right
Yeah,
that like that is fostering the support.
yeah, 100%. And I think part of it is also that there's just more people that are sympathetic now to Palestine versus Israel. So when you have more of those users that are searching up like what's happening in Gaza on TikTok or like Gaza on TikTok, they're going to see things that are, where Gaza is hashtagged or Gaza is mentioned. And like you just said, those types of algorithms really do cater to young people and what they're seeing today. I
Yeah.
think it's
Well,
pretty
and just the
fascinating.
idea
Yeah.
of like Israel being the establishment and that it's like
Oh, good point.
this thing is kind of being buried. They don't want you to see this, like watch this because they don't want you to see it. I do think that helps it blow up a little bit and like
100%.
maybe that's a great thing. Probably is
And
good
Ben,
in
I have to
general,
say, I
but
mean,
regardless.
the U.S. government has lent itself to this. I mean, there was that one day where the
Yeah.
Trump administration announced that any state that had any like boycotts of Israel weren't going to receive FEMA funding. Like that was,
Yeah.
and that blew up.
Just
Like, and then they, in a couple hours, they had to like quote unquote take it down and say, well, we didn't really mean that. But then when you read the text of what they were proposing,
mhm.
they did mean that, and it's actually still kind of in place.
What
So I
you're
think when
telling me they're not serious about free speech protections in the Trump
oh,
administration?
I
I heard
mean,
they're free speech warriors. I mean, come on.
huge free speech warriors, but I think this is a clip that's pretty fascinating. Just want to play this real quick for our viewers. We kind of already explained it, but I'm just going to play it right here.
Point, which is some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok broadcasts. So I'd note that's of real interest, and the president will get the chance to make action in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's when you say stuff like that, I mean, you're going to just perpetrate the problem or the perceived problem that you think it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating. I mean, I don't know that him in particular, but I would think of Mitt Romney as a type who would have, like, for example, spoken out about the Jimmy Kimmel thing this week, or like in some ways, like stood on the principles that allegedly the Republican Party is built around. And here, like, that's such an obvious viewpoint discrimination that you're taking government action towards, and it's just the dissidence there is pretty, I don't know, inexplicable.
Yeah.
It's
Ben,
explicable, but
do you think we're going to see more primary challengers kind of reject APAC money and corporate PAC money? I know we had a couple people already on that were like not taking APAC money, not taking corporate PAC money in general. I think corporate PAC money is the bigger theme here that includes APAC money. Do you think we're going to see more primary challengers kind of on the left?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think we're gonna have more primary challengers in general. I think maybe the more interesting question is, do we start to see more incumbents like adapt that strategy and kind of reject the money? I do think an important note when we talk about the APAC stuff is like some of the Democratic, like more left wing leaning members of Congress who lost to APAC challenges, Jamal Bowman, Cory Bush. I think a lot of people, when they hear about APAC and the money they get, think that they're like spending either it's a bribe or they're spending all this money on like Israel advertising, attacking these people for Israel.
But it's
what they do is not that. They operate like a normal PAC supporting a candidate, and they run ads for them that are about, like in the Jamal Bowman case and Cory Bush, it was about like things they had said against Obama. Like it was generally about them not being supportive enough of like the Democratic Party and the candidates and things like that. So or voting against, I think the IRA was one of the things, or the Build Back Better bill. So it is like a risk, not just in the sense of like popularity. Like it is tough when you have that money against you, but yeah, I would expect that as this tide turns and eventually there's such a disconnect between the public and the Democratic base and the actual members of Congress. I do think eventually that's going to have to somewhat even out, even if it's never like perfectly representative. And as that happens, I would expect more.